All right, everybody. Welcome to Apocrypha. Sorry to keep you guys waiting. Hope all is well. Everyone is doing well. So this evening, supposed to be last week, but we got him this week. We have Robert Mortem with us. From you say actual Satanism or actual devil worship? Okay. All right. Awesome. All right, 1 second here. One second. For some reason, the audio didn't come on over. Give me a quick second here, guys. The output. Go. Transition over. It is. All right. Mystic, say something.
Yes, how's it going? What's up?
There you go. Yep. There you go. Now we can hear you. Now we can hear you. All right. Rock on. All right. So you
Nice.
use both actual devil worship and actual Satanism.
I mean, most people know the TikTok, which is technically true devil worship, but my backup account, you know what I mean? So
Okay.
either one's appropriate.
All right. All right. Rock on. Rock on. All right. So, kind of just want to jump into this, right? So, for those of you that don't know, Robert's been on here once before, about a year ago, right? Kind of just stumbled on his ass on TikTok, and dude was like, he knows his shit. He knows his shit. And so we had him on, and not many people have been able to make me speechless or unable to say something in a podcast. I think Robert's probably like the one person that's been able to do that. So Robert, starting out here, I'm just going to jump right into the kind of the grit on this. Is a question I want to ask because this is how I view shit when I talk about Samael, Lucifer, and Satan, right?
Yeah.
So when I talk about these three, I don't view them as three separate entities. I view it as kind of like facets of the same entity, right? So Samael, Lucifer, kind of like Satan, obviously is more like a title than anything else. And so what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pantheist, so it's all in one unison to me. But polytheistically, there are divergences. I would argue you could, for instance, the devil and Lucifer are used synonymously in the Grimoire of Verum, by which we get the famous sigil of Lucifer that everybody sees. Those are synonymous there. Some people say that Lucifer isn't the devil. But then as far as Sackcloth, Samael, things like that are synonymous in Nag Hammadi Gnostic texts, like the Apocrypha of John, I believe, I'm fine with that too. And I view them as one and the same, as an adversarial motif.
Okay. Now I'm curious. I want to get Mystic and Rook in on this. Mystic, have you ever put any thought into that? Like Samael, Lucifer, Satan, kind of like being kind of separate, unified. Like, I know you're not
So
you're not a Satanist or anything, but
yeah, so not specifically, obviously, for those reasons, but in conversations and things like, the way I practice is very polytheistic with in very similar ways, and I think if somebody were to ask me that, like based on what I know, like how I would apply it to what I do and how I work, it would just be different to me. Again, I'm not Satanist, but it would be the different aspects of different interactions, different ways to interact with similar energies or the same energy. So, a lot of people talk about the cohorts of different pantheons, right? Like, you have Carnunos, Hern the Hunter, and Pan, and how they're represented in each one. Kind of like, to me, similar energies, similar things, maybe even the same thing for some, but different aspects, and each one has a different culture that goes kind of along with it too, and a different feel for it, right? So while we might use all interchangeably for one thing, I think it's beneficial to separate them out for other workings depending on what you're doing. And I will say, like, different times, different things have called to me that other people would consider the same, right? So I can see where it could be seen both ways.
Okay. All right. Rock on. Rook, what do you think?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to move. It's cutting out like every other word, and I can't hear well. So I'm gonna scoot so I can
Okay.
hear.
All right. Sounds good, man. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I did a class about an hour before we came on here, and part of that class was talking a little bit about the history of Lucifer, and included in that, I spoke about Satan, Samael, and there's not just three names, obviously, it's more than that. So, but what I will say is that, for example, the way I work with Lucifer and the way I interact with Lucifer is different to the way I work and interact with Samael, even though that I know they are of, the same kind of energy current, because I'm accessing a different mask of that current. The way in which I interact and work with it differs.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think that that's like necessary, otherwise there wouldn't need to be
Mm-hmm.
like these different masks. The
Yep.
the whole point in interacting with a different mask is because you're getting a different side or archetype of this being to work with slightly differently.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So, Robert,
Yeah.
for those like that weren't here before and all of that, we talked about, I remember last time we talked about kind of like ritual work and stuff like that. So how does that function for you?
As far as Lucifer and Samael, well, amuletically, I could apply Samael as a protection talisman because that's its usage in, for instance, the Grimoire of Armadale. And I think that's outside like thurgic demonolatry, like in the Ars Thurs, that says to each entity, it contains both good and evil in its intrinsic nature as a polarity, as a subjective thing of application of rituals, how I see it. So I could use that there like that. Boom. On the other side of things, I can utilize a Lucifer sigil, like I said, in the same Latin traditions I was referencing earlier, and side by side, distinctively, like you guys were saying. I agree with that, but in one unison at the same time. So that would tie into it that way, for instance. That's going to depend on Venus and the season it's in and everything like that, too, being Lucifer's associated with that in those texts.
Okay. Now, what I'm curious about here, though, so when you talk about this stuff, like, so like you have a really Abrahamic perspective on this, don't you?
Well, I think Abraham is a concept stolen from Abrasax, which is predating the Bible, I would argue, and things like the Greek magic papyri. I would say that they have later skewed usages in the linguistics. I would argue this for the term devil, devi, deva, and even Satanas as a pre-Christian application in a Greek culture. So as long as we understand that, we have the predecessory evidence. So my perspective there, that's how I see it.
So, but you do think that this stuff kind of goes beyond, like, kind of like the trifecta of Abrahamic faith, right?
Yeah, I mean, because the Bible, I think, is like a corrupt text. So when we go before that and we see things more inscribed, so in stone, like the Rosetta Stone, these cuneiform tablets, I see a lot more consistency there than I do with the Bible. But at the same time, some of the Bible serves as evidence by which earlier traditions arise, such as the talking serpent, which is the hieroglyphical application of the Egyptian term for declaring wisdom, a picture of a snake. So that's popping up from there. We can see it in Genesis. We take it back to the Assyrians as well. And so that's how I view the Abrahamic texts.
Yeah. No, I mean, 'cause I one of the kind of like point of contention I've kind of come into, like, with at least with demonolatry, when I'm talking about, so for example, like I've not read the Goetia, right? And my reasoning behind not reading the Goetia is because I feel it is tainted. I feel like it's not that I don't think that the things that it talks about or the demons that it discuss aren't real or aren't, reachable, but I feel like it's watered down. Like it's a scrap off of the Christian table, specifically the Catholic table.
Yeah, I would say that we could predate, just like Lilith stems from Mesopotamia and ends up in the Hebrew tradition. Solomonic magic also does, I can argue, and many of the deities, Elias, Beliar, and things of that nature. So once again, I'd say it's just more evidence that whoever thinks the Ars Goetian demons are Christian just doesn't have the source work chronological order, because we could clearly predate things like the cuneiform tablets thousands of years before the Hebrews and Christians. And if we see, like you said, those same demons there, I see no vast distinctions in, for instance, are you the sigils itself are you referring to, or perhaps the names, or maybe some of the depictions? It would depend on.
Well, so I think that like the majority of it is probably this. Again, this is my opinion. I don't have anything to necessarily back this up, but it's looking at the track record of the church, and kind of like, I don't know, it just doesn't. They're just things that don't seem like it fit, right? Again, I'm not saying that these things don't exist; they're not there, right? Or even that the names, you know, I'm not saying the names don't work or anything like that. I mean, I have somebody sitting next to me that is done years of work in the Goetia with success. I just want to know more. That's my point, right? I want to know what was left the fuck out.
Me too. I agree with that. I think a lot of people who are not studied as practitioners in other theologies, such as Christianity, Orthodox Judaism, Sedevacantist, traditionalistic Catholicism, distinct from some later traditions, as long as we can identify that, call spade there, understandingly going back to Mesopotamia, I see a vast chain of consistency. Now, some people I will say, well, some of these prayers sound Christians, but once again, if we study Christian theology, many of these applicants of demons and names are not part. It's Kabbalistic usually, which I would diverge from Christianity in the Zohar tradition. So in that regard, I have no problem with it because I'm learned in what Christianity is and isn't. I've seen people call things Christian, and all it's shown to me is that they haven't studied Christianity to call a spade on it. But I could see at the same time what they mean by that at times. I think there's a large divergence of Gnosticism too. Some people call that Christian. I agree with the Christian top theologians like James White. They worship demons. They were nothing to do with Christianity. So that's how I see it.
Take.
I mean, with things like the Lesser Solomon, the Ars Goetia, like, you know, what you're saying about, you know, that you feel like there's things missing and whatever. I mean, it's always gonna be that way, in the sense that, like, if we look back at the history of the Goetia, even the fact that several editions have been published of it, the amount of texts that have influenced that text, and yeah, I mean, obviously we have the Testament of Solomon, but what we know about the time around the Testament of Solomon was supposedly written is that it was during the Babylonian exile, around that time, and therefore you had that blend of cultures. So the way I kind of think about it is a little bit like Chinese whispers, but we still know it's a magical system that works. True. And it's also like, you know, the whole thing about you know, it being an Abrahamic text, the thing is that it's literally built upon planetary magic. Like, that is the, you know, if you trace it all the way back, that is kind of the core of what it is. It's astrological, it's planetary, which isn't Abrahamic at all.
No, yeah. No, definitely. Again, like I said, I mean, I said that, like, you know, you're very successful in what you do, right? So it's not like it doesn't work. So Robert, do you think the way people kind of go about the occult today, do you think we've lost touch?
The majority of people usually, I've always seen it that way. It just don't seem to know that what they're talking about, but I never would just make assumptions on that. I was used to that with the church already, with 99% of the church contradicting their own Bible. And I often, that's my most often thing we engage in is the debates on TikTok, live, back to back, no pics, people coming up, and me just desecratingly refuting them with their own Bible, just to get it out of the way of an argument back to those texts. Now, I said, some people say, you know what, Lucifer is a Christian concept. How did they know that? I have a first century application of Ovid's Metamorphosis in, as she was just sounding, a planetary context. And that's for a century. We don't have the Christian usage until the late 300s, Latin Vulgate St. Jerome. So right there, we could see that it was a Latin common pagan theme, similar to Aphrodite worship, because Venus. And later, Christians using these Latin and Greek pagan languages would become, the majority usage or whatever. So that's how I see it. And yeah, people in that sense have lost touch a lot, but not everyone. And I think study people that are sincere, no matter what they're doing, are going to show it that they're sincere. And that's what I look for.
Okay. So on that basis of like, people losing touch, do you think it's more of kind of like an academic aspect that they've lost touch with, or a spiritual aspect that they've lost touch with?
Not necessarily, because someone could just have nature and learn from that, emanating omens and stuff, but it's just going to come down to like when people start telling me this Asmodeus picture's wrong, this one's right, that's Christian, this isn't. That obviously is when it comes in handy to just know the source work, because now we can just narrow it down to where it's coming from, the history of it, when it pops up in the historical time chart, all that. So for that side, yeah, I think that's lacking thoroughly. Especially with the majority religions like the Abrahamics, who are just walking over people in debates in many cases, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like one of the things I've always found interesting about having you on from the first time, and even now it's just a repeat of like the first time. So I'm very anecdotal in like the sense that like my occultism is very experience based, right?
Yes.
And I work in a way that like I know the shit you're talking about, but I couldn't quote it. I couldn't quote it off the top of my head, right?
Right.
And I think it's always interesting to have someone like you on, because not everyone has like that like recall to this information to be able to kind of put things into perspective. I think the only other person I know that's remotely close to how you are is actually, my partner here, Ira. She's able to recall stuff like off the top of her head like crazy.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is also one of the reasons why, like, kind of like when we have an interview, you're hard to follow, man.
I'm sorry.
you're hard to follow, because I mean, you break it down so specific. So there's like so much there's so many different angles that can be gone at with that, So
Yeah. And I think it comes in handy in debating some of the, the Christians that come at me when they try to say, hey, listen, let me show you something. You're being this, and I'm just like, which source? This one, that one, this one. They're like, I gotta go. And I think that'll get rid of, because any practitioner, witch, pagan, occultist, etc., is going to deal with being condemned to hell in society today. And you got that option. You can get logical with these people who rely on faith. You could try to like hug them with kindness, or I think the most effective is just, what do you believe? What's the source? Okay, here's the problems. What's next? Now I could just go and we've seen this effectively work with people who have told me, I haven't been interested in religion for 40 years. When I saw this, I said, oh shit, now I am, because it gave a whole different perspective. So in that sense, I think it's good. But at the same time, there's many practitioners, like you said, who may not be able to verse it on the spot, still are very in touch with the spirit. And so that happens too, like in chaos magic and shit.
Yeah, and what do you think of chaos magic?
That keeps coming up.
I think I look at it like a freestyle rap verse or written. It's kind of catching the energy in the moment. It's not too ceremonial, specified to the T, but it's useful, and that's how I see it, at least in all my studies of like, Osman Spare and Thurgic demonology and shit like that.
You see, I have the philosophy, or I have the idea in my head that all magic is chaos magic, because magic is a manipulation of energy, and the energy that we manipulate is already existing all around us in chaos. We just become the conduit to give it direction and purpose.
I agree with that. I guess I'm referring more so to the sigil style because usually they're more
Okay.
chicken scratchy than some of them. You know what I mean? In that sense, it's kind of like cat. It's almost like to me like being possessed in the sigil in the moment
Yeah.
versus like taking a more formulated sigil. But I agree with what you just said too. Absolutely.
Okay. Sorry, that just made me really happy that he agreed with me.
Yeah, I mean it's a fact. It is. Everything is chaotic. So.
So here's an unpopular opinion. Oh my God. I got alarms going off here. Sorry about that. So, and I just forgot what I was going to say. I did that.
Unpopular opinion.
Yeah, and I know I said unpopular opinion, but then it completely left because the alarm going off on the computer just completely fucked me up. Like what the fuck, man? ADHD's a motherfucker. What the hell was I going to say? It's an unpopular opinion. I completely forgot it now.
Hey, you have plenty of them. I'm sure you can
I
come
know.
up with
Yeah.
one.
I do have plenty of them. Okay, no, now I remember. So I'm of the mindset, and there's two ways to go about this. But one conversation that I continually have with my partner here is both of us think that there should be a little bit more, for lack of a better term, and I know Mystic and Rook are going to hate this, but we feel that there should be a little bit more gatekeeping on the occult.
I agree.
In the sense of like what's taught, how it's taught, what's learned. Like you can practice things like however the fuck you want. That's fine. But it just kind of feels like people are just kind of pulling shit out of their ass and making it up as they go along. You know, which it has its own relevancy, I suppose, but it feels a bit disingenuous.
For me, it's when people try to make entities into what they want them to be,
Mm-hmm.
and then use that as like a projection, and is a projection of them, and like literally just what they think, but they say it like it's ultimate truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
That's
I get very semantic. Gatekeeping is just not the right word, but
Right.
I agree with what you're saying.
Right. Robert, what do you think?
Yeah, I've always been accused of that since day one of using social media years ago. Just, oh, you're gatekeeping just because I'm pointing out bullshit and trying to get people to be consistent. Why? Because they give a bad name when other people like atheists and Christians and non-mystical people come to me and think, oh, Satanists are terrible, occult people are terrible. I'm just like wanting to sort it. So the more, like you said, that's allowed for people to just do whatever they want, the worse a name they may give for people who are actually putting in the work. And so in that regard, I always pointed out bullshit and said, well, here's the evidence. And I've been accused of gatekeeping. So in that sense, sure. But as you just said, people could do what they want at the same time. I just think we have to be a little more consistent to some extent. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I do also think that gatekeeping is a really dumb term. Like, not necessarily the term in itself, but like when you're accused of gatekeeping. Like, I made a YouTube video. Must have been like a month or two ago now, and I was talking about spiritual hygiene, and I was saying like you can't expect to be spiritually clean if you don't fucking shower, and like that you've got to kind of keep yourself clean on a physical level as well, and relatively so. I said
At least once a week.
Please.
anyway, and for saying that, I got accused of gatekeeping, and in a way, if someone accuses you of gatekeeping, it's kind of a compliment because they're implying that you have some kind of fucking authority over their lives. Because it's like how am I stopping you from doing what you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
I'm expressing an opinion, and that opinion does not have any power over you and what you do unless you give it that power. So I don't believe that one is even capable of gatekeeping. Like, who the fuck are we to gatekeep at the end of the day? You know?
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Yeah, I think gatekeeping is just like I said, I think it's the wrong word. One of the things when I hear like we use it too much, wanting to be authentic and share knowledge is one thing and being open to it. But when I hear gatekeeping, I don't think trying to like and to educate somebody or to share my knowledge with them, I think of telling them they have to do something a certain way, but people don't use it that way, right? So I will say or do something, and somebody can come to me, any of you, and you'll say, "Look, Mystic Swan, you mentioned this, and I've done some research, I've looked at a lot of things, and that's just not the experience and what's been, what we know." And I'd be open to that. So that's the problem with gatekeeping is gatekeeping defines the person giving the information, right? It takes the person on the other end to be receptive to it to make it valuable. And that's the problem.
God is
People on
within
the
my
receiving end
showers.
are not they're not responsive to it, right? How dare you know or say something that I don't know? How dare you try to give me any information? And they get embarrassed, I think, right? To be like, like it's okay. And we have to be better as practitioners to not try to focus on pulling somebody's rug out from under them with the purpose of making fun of them versus to just give them information. If they can't accept it, gatekeep away.
Yeah,
That's on
definitely.
them. It does dumb it down though.
You know, also changing up with just a little bit on the subject here because there's something I want to mention before I forget about it. There's something you said, Robert, about like kind of like Christians when they kind of come to you and they're like, oh, Satan, oh, it's evil, like that type of shit.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of thinking, and I've always thought in my head when they say that, it's like, but Jesus said that Satan was the god of the earth, right? Like, I mean, it's in the Bible. The Bible states that Satan is the god of the earth. And so the thing is he is a god, like to at least some degree. And if he's the god of the earth, wouldn't it make sense that we work with or revere the god of the earth because it's the plane of existence where we exist? I mean, I don't know. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I often go right there with when Christians come to debate me because they have this idea as the idea of Satan to go, well, do you accept God and Satan? I say, is Satan the God of this world? And they say, yeah. I say, is God the God of this world? Like Revelation 11:4 says, Zechariah 4, etc. They go, yeah. Well, how many gods are there? One. Bad math. Isaiah, I believe, 44 says there's I am God, there's none other, and now we got a bunch of gods. In fact, Jesus in the text calls men gods. John 10, Psalm 82. Moses called God to Pharaoh. Exodus 7:1. Fucking angels are called gods as well, Elohim. So at that point, they just start playing word games, contradicting themselves, and at least they could see it wasn't what they thought it was a second ago. So I think it's a great approach to if someone's like coming from outside, the occult context. Yeah. Questioning these things, condemning us. Many of my followers and shit, they tell me stories all the time. I was out doing this. A Christian came up, judged me for this. I pulled the verse out. They didn't know what to do. Done. Easy debate. And we do it because we care, because I was one of these people. I was a Christian who spent much more time studying and taking it serious many, many, many years ago. And I think the more open we are about that, they try using that going, hey, this guy was a Satanist turned Christian. Look at this. Usually when you see the guy wasn't grafting any kind of rooted foundational point of Satanism, but they'll use it. And so I use mine. I say, I was a Christian theologian. I did this, but now I'm a Satanist. And they just always try to find a different narrative. Like, did somebody affect you? Did it? No, just read the Bible and took it serious and studied more. They don't like that. And so that's been my experience, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I just generally try to throw scripture back at them, at least the ones that I can remember. The easy one, Exodus 22:18, thou shalt not permit a witch to live. That's the easy one. Then there's another one. I can never pronounce the name of it. I think it's Old Testament. It's happy shall he be who taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones.
Yeah, I think it's like Psalm 137:8 or so.
So it's just,
there's a lot of those.
Yeah, so like when they start talking about like peace and love and all that stuff, it's like, it's like you really haven't read your own book, have you?
Yeah, much of the text, many of them say things like that. Absolutely.
So would you agree with the statement that the monotheistic trifecta here, I believe that at the current state the society is in, I believe that Judaism, Islam, and Christianity are doing nothing but holding back society and causing just unbelievable amounts of havoc that are completely unnecessary because of their theological principles and them trying to apply that to real world scenarios. How do you feel
Yeah,
about that?
I'd say as far as the sources, the doctrines, some of the texts we just quoted, the underlying thing being implanted in their minds and alleged consciousness, that's the issue. Have I met a lot of Orthodox Jews, Christian theologians, and scholarly Muslims who are friends with me? Of course. Consistent people. So I always like to be fair and say, these are good adherents of these faiths because they recognize this, because they don't interpret that way. But yeah, many people, when it comes to religious extremism, fall right in the Abrahamic umbrella 99% of the time. And that's the case. They believe in hell. It's coercive. It's extreme. There's different approaches. People try to hug us. They try to Barney Jesus us. Hey, Jesus loves you, loves you, loves you, loves you, loves you. But if that don't work, you'll see God's going to burn you in hell. Well, anything they could use. If we have to get into a loving relationship of a guy who's about to burn us, I would question why they're in that relationship. And if they don't view it that way, then why are they called, the bride of Christ, the church in Ephesians? So.
Yeah. Mystic, your thoughts?
I don't really have any on that. There's so much. There's so much to pack there. It's I'm trying to see how to say it because I was kind of writing a couple of notes down about. I don't want to use the term good, but when you have somebody who is a part of a religion that notoriously, for my own experience, right, has been difficult, Christianity, Catholicism, whatever. And you have people who practice it, who do interpret things a certain way, and they're like, okay, we interpret in a way that doesn't have that evil fire and brimstone to it, right? It just makes me wonder, even more so, how much of it is created, how much of whatever is in the Bible in either testament is just completely perverted by a man writing it to make it the way he wanted to be in control of something, right? So I wonder if people really experience Christianity the way it should be experienced, in my opinion, and not so much on the Bible. They're a much friendlier group of people, for sure. So it's hard for me to kind of feel anything on that particular topic because I'm human. I do lump pretty much all of the people I know that are Christian in that bucket of they're supporting a thing that their Bible, according to their beliefs, say that I should burn in hell. For having a tattoo, or playing with the pigskin, throwing a ball around, or whatever, and not being able to see that if Christian God was the way that it was, I am almost certain that's not what he meant. And it just seems so obvious.
No, yeah,
Like,
definitely.
and again, not saying that the other stuff doesn't exist, or that there's not heaven and hell and God and Satan. I don't know. My theories, or the way I work, is pantheistic, and so I don't know what that's like. I know I used to believe it because I was told to, but if you threw me in a field and didn't teach me, I would never have come up with Christianity. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I think I generally do the same thing. I lump most Christians together into the same bucket. We're not going to talk about the bucket that I throw the other ones into because they will probably get banned. But
As long as
I
it's
think
not one cup.
on a case by case basis, like there are Christians that are tolerable, or even enjoyable to talk to. Mark 5 is one of them. But he's Eastern Orthodox, right?
Yeah, it's completely different.
Does Bobby actually consider himself a Christian though?
I don't know. I don't know.
He's something.
Yeah.
He's something.
He loves Christ, but
yeah, a little much. Yeah, but it's his shtick.
Is it like that? I love your Christ, but I do not like your Christians, kind of thing.
It's kind of like that.
what?
Like he likes Jesus, but not Christians, because he
Yeah, no, Christians. he thinks most fucking idiots.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Spends most of the time arguing with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And there you go. There you go. Robert, another random question here for you. What is your idea on egregores?
Yeah, I hold to it. I mean, I think that can begin in someone's mind and externally become like a Tibetan tulpa. It's an external egregoric entity that many people, can tap into. And I think an individual kind of servitor aspect is applicable as well. These kind of Eastern traditions are just all consistent with Hermeticism, as above, so below. And so in each case, we can see that the earlier we get before some, as we discussed, the Abrahamic religions, the more enlightened, the more meditative and mind-based we see stuff. And it's all elemental, like he said, pantheistic, animistic. These are beautiful things. And I think that when people who condemn it and give it a bad name can see past that and see some of this, we've seen people, as he just said, Christians who don't believe in hell, like universalists, and who I could see, these are good-hearted people. They're against some of the bad stuff, and they could compatibly sit down and have these conversations. Those diversities I could respect, but like you said, we're being told we're evil people in one breath. It's kind of hard to take that serious, especially when the Muslims are also saying that to Christians, that if you worship a man, it's considered shirk. This is a hellfire condemning practice. So when Christians ask me, well, what if there's hell? I bring that up. There's two different hells right there alone. They usually can't address that. So you should never base these things on coercion and fear and being afraid into it. I think we could be more consistent than that.
No, definitely. I mean, we actually did. Dyra and I will be right. Like right. Mark's got to have like a beeper when his name is mentioned.
I literally that just made me laugh.
Like,
he shall appear.
Speak of the devil, and so shall he appear. But Dyra and I did a video, which we'll be uploading this week. I think, right? This
Wednesday.
Yeah.
Time.
Yes, I will. I promise. That'll be a tonight thing. Talking specifically about egregores, and the reason I ask is because there was a point that I made at the end of the video that kind of, I kind of opened up my own mind with it, I suppose, because there's something that mystics said that ties right into this. The fact that some mystics said, well, heaven and hell might be real. I don't know. Like, there's, we don't know, right? That's the thing. That's why we believe in it, right? Because we don't know it, right? You can only believe in that which you do not know. If you know it, you don't have to believe in it because you know it to be true. Right. So an egregore, the idea or concept of something being, power of the mind, or that the belief of the group has created it. Doesn't that technically make everything an egregore? Everything? Regardless of its historical relevance?
Yeah, I can see what you're saying there. Yeah, sure.
I think it comes down to the fact that we know that the role that the mind plays in ritual, in magic, in spirit communication, that the mind plays a key role. Egregores are created from thought and therefore from the mind. So really, there's essentially an egregoric level to anything. And the thing is with, I think especially if you are, I think this is why I've been in some level of conflict with people when I make the claim that 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 demons don't love you, basically. Like they're not they don't care about you in the way that you think, and all of this kind of thing, right? People struggle with that because of their own psychological concept of said entity. And I feel like that is something that people can fall into when they are sort of new to this, is a projection of their bias onto an entity. Yes, that still remains a present thing because we can never fully shed the ego, but it's learning to, I don't know what the right word is, but basically just learning not to project your own stuff onto what you're communicating with, what you're working with, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Now let's get Rook in here. Rook, can you hear us okay now?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So Rook, I'm curious, like, so with everything we've been talking about, where do you sit with everything?
So going back to gatekeeping, for me, a better word would probably be accountability. And I think it is needed at times, especially for when people are being exploited. For example, pay me $200 and I can make this happen for you in a magical way without the own person's energy and work going into it. I think that's a big thing. Um, and I don't mean like the exchange of money for energy and work that that would be appropriate, but I do think it's important to check people, especially to keep people from being exploited. And then the Christian thing, I've spoke with Mystic about this, about lumping everybody in together. It's so easy to do, and I find myself doing it, but I think it's can be very reductive. I know a Christian, and more than just one, that her existence and presence and what she does, it really creates positive changes in the world. And she's
Really
not
does.
not not hateful at all, but it can be hard to wrap your mind around, especially this is Mystic's point where he argues with me. If I say, oh, somebody is so good, and they say, well, I don't like this group, but you're one of them, so you're okay, and like giving exceptions. But no, that's what I think. Sorry, I had to make some notes so I didn't forget what I wanted to say.
But I will say that person, if you're talking about the one I think it is, her, I don't want to say brand, but her brand, I guess, of Christianity is very different than Southern Baptist and,
Oh,
those
yeah,
specific
no, that's
denominations. I mean, I don't want to share her information without, her being aware of it, but I don't consider her part of the Christian group that we talk about because she doesn't interpret the Bible the way that many people do to use it for hatefully, right?
and this person would not be somebody that said, "Oh, Brad, that would post negative stuff about whatever, gay people, magical people." She's not one of those that would say, "Oh, but I like you." She would never like be hateful or any of that. So it can be difficult to
She's a
reconcile it.
unicorn.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot, but we don't want people making assumptions or stereotyping us, and they do. There's enough about that. So I think it depends on the person, but they're not all lumped together. It's
Yeah,
easy to do that,
absolutely.
though.
Yeah, it is what you've just been saying. It reminds me of my dad. So my father, converted to Islam probably about 18 months ago.
Hmm.
And I mean, probably oversharing a little bit here, but the man's been seems to be in a permanent identity crisis because this isn't the first time he's converted to a religion. Journey of the soul and all that. So yeah, and I think he's got into that through living and working in Saudi Arabia. And I know that, his religion is directly against what I do. And, he's said to me that, working with the jinn is forbidden, but he knows what I do. And because it's me, it's okay. And while I know that his religion is directly against what I do, I'm happy for him in a way because Islam seems to be the only thing that has managed to get him to stop drinking and to look after his health. And for that, I'm just like, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, if it's working
That
for him.
that piece of it is what kills me about this whole conversation. And that's, I think, what it boils down to is if you can be part of a religion and interpret it the way the others do and believe it, then how does that exception happen, right? Because you can accept me, but I know in your heart it's either because you believe in me and believe that that I truly am a good person, but that means that you're wrong, or that you really believe in your religion and that I'm wrong, but you can't tell me. So it's like it's got to be one of those two things, and that freaks me out. But I don't think it's that easy. I mean, I'm sure it's not that, nothing's that simple, but that's where my brain goes.
No, I totally get that. I've gone there too in my own head.
Yeah. It's like, you got to pick one. Either you're wrong and you're just going to be like, screw it, I'm going to ignore that part, or the other.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
could it be the same if the shoe's on the other foot though? Because the thing is,
Mhm.
I can say that, I'm, I don't like the Abrahamic religion, what what it says about my kind, and other kinds, but I'm happy to tolerate the people in my life that are a part of that. So yeah, it's kind of
Mhm.
like, I don't know, if we think about it from our own perspective and on the flip side of it, maybe we can understand the other person's perspective a bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Empathy is important.
Yeah, I mean, I think like going back to Robert here, like, I mean, I think like what you said, Robert. I mean, you said you have friends that are Muslim, that are Christian, that like
Oh
all
yeah, guys
denominations.
almost bring tears to my eyes sometimes live. They come up and said, one Christian said, "I wish one day to have half of the knowledge that you have of my religion, sir. I respect you, sir." But then he goes, in some kind of way, like he was just saying, he's back to that belief. But there's like a sense of like, I am my brother's keeper. I think that
Mhm.
side, if you can meet him there, you may get those good results. I tell Christians all the time, we get it. We need Jesus. Go to a Native American shop, buy stuff, put $50 in his pocket. He's probably not going to repent to Jesus, but he's probably going to respect him. He's probably going to treat him different and see he went a further way of action. Depending on Christians, what they do is really what determines how we respond. And it's always the reactionary, never the initiative in my case. If people come up condemning me, I go right to the debate and that energy. If they come up all nice and respectful, then I keep it there too. It's like the peace fight, That's just how I see it. And although sometimes it's kind of hard to imagine, how can you, approach it that way if you think I'm an evil, wicked person who's in need of eternal torture for doing things wrong? At the same time, somehow they approach it. I'm not sure if they don't take it too serious in the back of their head makes them do that, but I think that's better,
Well, I mean,
honestly.
their
And
own
there is pastors that say,
interpretation, their own interpretation of hell though is wrong. Like the
Mhm.
whole concept of heaven and hell, heaven is supposed to be closeness to God, and hell is supposed to be distance from God, separation from God. Right. So the thing is the whole idea of hell is technically just fucking purgatory. Like the whole flaming gnashing of teeth shit, that came later,
Mm.
So like they're even
Yeah,
their
and
like
that
internalized idea of it is just, it's incorrectly interpreted.
and misinterpreted, because the gnashing of teeth thing, I'm pretty sure in the Old Testament, in the book of Job or Psalm somewhere, it's just used for like when they're like mad at you, they're like gnashing, like maybe in envy, not necessarily, I'm being tortured. Look, my teeth are gnashing. It burns. I mean, maybe, but the fact that people could sit there and be like, yeah, that's what they need is kind of creepy. But I always ask people, what are you going to do in heaven for the first 10 million years? Is there boredom? If there's not, how does God just give you like a Ren and Stimpy shot? I mean, why? It's
Yeah.
almost admitting he has to give you a lobotomy to enjoy his presence at that point. So I don't think it makes sense.
Great.
I will never forget that.
Neither will I. A Ren and Stimpy shot.
Or
Oh
however
my
it is, yeah.
God. Yeah, if I highly doubt anyone that isn't pushing 40 they just don't know what the fuck that meant, but that was so good.
Simpson J. Cat.
You're in there somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying with the whole Christian thing though, because like Mark 5, which is he's actually in the chat right now. So he's like the only Christian that I can actually get along with. I had him on the show once. Mystic was on with us. And so I went at him like with the immediate assumption
Sure
that he
did.
was going to start telling me that I was going to go to hell and stuff like that. So I was aggressive as fuck, right? And he
You
made
were a
me
dick.
feel like such a dick because he was so nice
And patient.
and patient. Yeah.
Yeah.
And since then, him and I have had like amazing conversations, and none of those conversations have ever turned into, oh, you need to convert.
Right.
It's just talking about the theology of it, the philosophy of it, and learning from each other, right? In those conversations. And it's like, that's the only time, he's the only person I've ever had a decent conversation with, and with a Christian.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
I
awesome.
definitely know what you're saying there. So, all right, Robert, this has gone by really fucking fast. So Robert, where can people find you?
Mainly on TikTok at True Devil Worship. That's where I stream. And on Instagram, it's Robert Mortem.
Okay.
So that's the two
cool.
main ones.
All right. So we got one more thing we got to do. We usually do it at the beginning of the show, but I figure we save it until the end of the show. Because I know how you get, Robert, and like I have to keep up with you. So you can hang out with us if you want to keep hanging out. But Mystic does a tarot reading, an energy read each week. If you want to hang out for it, that's cool. If you got to bounce, we totally get it. It's up to you. But Mystic is going to do his weekly read for us.
Okay.
So
Before I do that, can I ask a question?
yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, and this is for you, Robert. Something that Addie said earlier. Most of us, and I would say a very large majority, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I think most will agree, we will never be at the scholarly level of knowledge of the ability to have that kind of a conversation, right? So for those of us that are practicing and that are doing our thing and learning, and also trying to be supportive of not, I don't want to say the occult, but just of things other than Christianity or whatever.
Right.
Do you have anything that, like, I don't know, books, things, or anything that you recommend or that you would tell to somebody that could give them a good understanding or a way to start to learn a little bit to kind of just grasp some of the concepts that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think the best way to approach anything like that is just not overwhelming yourself, taking it gradual. Understand everything takes time, so I never expect people to necessarily just get, like you said. Generally, we kind of give out a book list of my recommendations usually, because to me, Satanism initially, the way it was used, especially in Europe in 1911 by like Arthur Waite in his reedition of ceremonial magic. That's more like expansive, like paganism initially, before Anton LaVey like codified it and made it like a church idea. So that to me is covered in so much literature. I think is crucial. Is like I think I mentioned on the last time I was here. Eliphas Levi, of course, his
Yep.
works are crucial for me. Understanding he was a former Christian who came out and is dismissing a lot of things and taking it back to the ancient Goat of Mendes as the Baphomet, which is a key source for pantheism, as it's mentioned in Transcendental Magic. So I'd recommend that. Arthur Waite. Obviously, all the demonologist texts we talked about. And as long as we're just engaging in those things, maybe getting a general grasp of them, I think we're doing great things with an open mind. And then whatever a person prefers to put extra work in for, whatever, now they feel it where it's alleviated and balanced more. And that's my highest recommendation of reading or studying any of it on that level.
I appreciate that. I've read quite a few things and take a lot of notes and do stuff, but I always like to hear what can we do to like my academic life is pretty much all nursing and clinical things. So I don't have a lot of time to do the other things. So it's always good to kind of hear what are some things that we can do. The rest of the population who will not be able to remember what they ate for breakfast yesterday. To kind of get
Yeah.
some new knowledge. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I
appreciate it.
have no illusions to ever be able to regurgitate shit the way that Robert does. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. And it's not, I get what you mean, but I mean, it's not even just that. It's just the ability to interpret more than anything. Like to take information is not an easy thing. And I know we joke all the time about, who can comprehend, but let's face it, at least in the United States, reading comprehension is not a really good thing. And actually being able to critically think and interpret stuff is also not a very good skill. as a whole in this country. So
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure that that's not just here.
Well, and the
you
thing
know,
is I
so.
think I think the thing is like, I mean, I've heard a lot of people give people like Robert shit for like saying like, oh, they're just like repeating stuff that they've read and stuff like that. But here's the thing though, like I think that it takes all walks of life and all kind of like the way we tackle this. Like we have 5 different people on this panel right now, right, that handle this in 5 different ways. And I think every single one is equally as important as the other. For example, like if we look at Robert, what Robert's capable of doing when he was talking about, like when he talks to a Christian, when a Christian tries to use scripture against him, things like that, he's almost, it's going to sound really stupid and corny, but he's like an occult lawyer. You know? Like, you know?
You can see that.
And we need that. We need that. We need people like that. But we need people like Mystic. We need people like Rook. We need, you know, people like Dyra, like myself. We need everyone, right? And again, like when I talk about like unification inside of the occult, right? It's not about unification of practice, but it's unification of principle, right? It's the unification of the ideal, what of that necessity. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I agree 100%. I think that's the beauty of like a pantheonic perspective. If everyone lives their own God, we all have different elemental attributions of a talent. And you know, if he's doing that, they're doing this, and I'm doing this. Now it's like working as a unison, because why should everyone work in the same thing when they could do different things, get more done now? So I find beauty in that certain people, the way our lives has turned out, we just do that. Absolutely, man. Appreciate it.
Definitely.
And one more thing, like you said, the conversation, how we're doing here, I think you're one of the best podcast hosts I've ever heard personally. I think you got everything, the radio voice, everything. So that's why I come here. I don't like doing podcasts. I just think this is done right. This reminds me of like when, you know, people made shit right, like in the 90s or whatever. So I do appreciate that.
I appreciate that, man. Appreciate that. All right, Mystic, you ready to give us that read?
I am. I'm actually using a very interesting deck today I have not used before, and it is called Into the Lonely Woods. I don't have the box. Just give you a quick back, and I know it's going to be dark. It's you know, they turn the lights out at the bar, so my place of choice. But they're very much, you'll recognize, some people will recognize the imagery, and so it's an oracle deck. It's different. It's really designed to take substance of things. So it's a really neat deck. So let's pull 3 cards to kind of just see what is going to be around. And the first 2 cards are interesting because both of them are introspective would be the right word. So the first one is in the vastness of it all. So where the wild things are, if you've ever seen that, this is related imagery. But very fitting for the discussion tonight, in the vastness of it all. It reminds me to think about just, no matter how much we know, learn, do, feel, or engage, we are tiny pieces in something so big, yet we're also part of something so big, right? So when we think about things being in the vastness of it all, it reminds us to be humble, but also to take no shit, right? So our next card is, and is it lonelier at night? Also a very introspective read for me. If we think about it, and is it lonelier at night? A lot of people, I don't want to say a lot, let me take that back. It is often understood that things in the night are scary, or what is unable to be seen is threatening. And we spend a lot of our life learning that that's just not true. There's a lot of beauty in the dark and silence and solace when we're sitting alone by ourselves, or when we're outside in the woods, or at the back of our house, or at the beach, or wherever, and it's silent. And we look at what's around us, and that's what I think about when I think about something at night, or is it lonelier in the night? It's not, because the person that keeps you the best company is yourself. And if that's not the person who keeps you the best company, we need to work on that, because that's got to be where your strength comes from first, right? Before it can be anybody else. And then that leads us to the third card, a time to share, which is pretty cool because we go through this introspection, be yourself, grow yourself with the first two cards. And now we're looking at sharing it all. So having conversations and engaging other people with your thoughts without being a dick is helpful. So think of these three things when you guys are out and about this week about just how big things really are and how the night and the things that we might be afraid of are actually some of our strongest times, and being able to share it with the people that we care about. So really cool deck. Highly recommended as like an affirmation thing. It's a little cutesy for my taste, like the imagery. Like I like a little bit more aggressive imagery, for example. But it's a really cool deck. And that's it for this week.
Awesome. Well, Robert, thank you very much for coming on again. I greatly appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And yeah, we'll have to, do something again at some point. Yeah.
Sure, man.
All right. Well, with that being said, everybody, thank you very much for coming out tonight and watching the show. You guys are fucking amazing. You're the reason we do this. And as always, hail thy fucking self. We'll see you in the next one. Peace the fuck out.
Deuces.